That'd be awesome. Okay, so I wanted to start some of the questions that came up for me. You talked scheduling was talked about, the scheduling of the substances, but I just want to know what is this basis for scheduling? What do you all know about how it's decided what's a drug, what's not, how it's scheduled? How does the government even get involved? How does that start?
DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration, is the body that determines the scheduling, but perhaps Max knows a little more specific.
Yeah, so one of the jobs of the DEA for the Controlled Substance Act was to make a definition of levels. And a level is a schedule. And there's 5 of those levels currently. And so it ranks from the very most dangerous, with the most addiction, with the highest risk of overdose, and absolutely no medical benefit, all the way down to it has medical benefit, it's not that addictive, it's not that dangerous, but it still needs to be regulated and measures watched after. But if you saw my lecture at the National Psychedelic Symposium, all of the other Schedule 1s that they list also are medicines. Peyote, MDMA, so many of these Schedule 1s that they say provide no medical benefit, we have tons of proof that that's also not true.
There's also scheduling there's also a separate scheduling list at the United Nations level. So beginning with the 1961 Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs, and in that case also, cannabis is a Schedule 1 drug with the same qualification.
Do you want to say anything, Daniel?
No.
Okay.
It's not my expertise.
So no, and on this, it's interesting too, because then we start to throw around this term medicine, and so with marijuana, it's interesting. At one point, people were called witches or otherwise because they were using it as medicine, and now we have this 180 where in order to justify it being legal or rescheduled, we have to call it a medicine. So I guess within that, I want to know, not besides just the medical uses, what are like the enhancement benefits? Dan, you might be good for this. But yeah, talking about the enhancement, or more of that religious side of like, no, we're not doing this to respond to something negative in our lives or difficult, but starting at a baseline of healthy, like what does that look like?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And what we decided to do with medicinal mindfulness is to not approach the political or engage mainstream to try to convince people to accept this work. We decided to leave that to activists like Max and a lot of really competent people and explore the potentials of what this medicine could do if it were already accepted, right? And so what we found is that not only can we create experiences that lead to physical well-being and healing, but it also promotes and supports psychological development and spiritual development. And so coming from a healthy ego structure, we all have difficult things that we could heal or clear, but most of us have enough healthy ego structure to already begin exploring who we wish to be in the world, how we wish to express ourselves on the planet, what our calling is, how we wish to be of service to the planet, how we wish to make money in alignment with our values and traditions. And so we've created these experiences and work with people to teach them how to use psychoactives, specifically with cannabis sativa, and also with the breath to promote this exploration. And what we're finding is there's really no limits to it. Like Max was saying, like when we first started, this wasn't even my idea to do this with cannabis. This was a friend of mine's who's not here today, and I didn't even believe it was possible to do this work with cannabis. And so, but we started to experiment with it, and what we found is that what I thought was it could be a neat training tool to teach people how to use other psychoactive medicines, right? Something kind of approaching the level of other medicines. But what we found is that it's actually as strong as any other classic psychedelic, like LSD, psilocybin, ayahuasca, DMT, and it has the ability to mimic these other medicines. But it's more you can navigate it. You can learn how to navigate these medicines with cannabis by using cannabis, and you can steer your ship, your inner journey ship, towards developing and creating a life that you want. You can bring that back into this world through the use of this medicine. And it was really surprising to us. And for a while, every time we did these circles, I was like, well, I hope it works, And they're just laying there. I really hope it's doing something, But we've been pretty consistent with working with several hundred people now. I've had very few, like less than 1%, a fraction of 1% of adverse reactions, which is in line with all the other psychedelics. And we also know how to engage and how to work with those, what you would call adverse reactions, which are just really strong experiences. And these, when approached from a healthy perspective, these can be some of the most healing and transformational experiences that someone's ever had in their entire life. So we've engaged, we've let Max and Carol take on this fight. But because of their work, we've been able to step into and live into a post-prohibition world already, right? And we're just now touching on this, what the possibilities are. So what would it look like then if a whole culture could support this work, right? And that's a big question, and I would encourage you to really think about that. That like this piece around if in the 30s we had made a different decision, would we be in global warming? We would be having these crises right now. That could also be true on a spiritual and psychological perspective as well. Like if we hadn't outlawed these medicines, would we have the severe epidemics of trauma and war on the planet right now? And religious fanaticism in this way, because we would all have this direct access to understanding and awareness and awakening and connection to divine source, and which leads to natural tendencies towards compassion and respect for each other, right? So the cost are actually what we're living in right now is actually we can't actually imagine the cost because it's so outside of what we believe is possible. And so we're working to heal a 100-year injury. And so I think that's what I'd like to say about that work.
Has anybody seen the BuzzFeed where they get the cops stoned? Yeah? So my favorite part is they get this one cop stoned, and he's got this huge handlebar mustache, like real deal cop kind of a guy. And you're sitting there watching him, and he's like, you know what's really interesting? I feel like I don't need to be in control right now. And you're just like, whoa, shit, that's pretty profound. And it's like, well, when I'm having a real bad day and I get on the road, I'm one of those road rage dudes that like you don't like. But it's like, if I smoke a joint and then I hop in my car, it's completely different. You just don't care anymore. You're just like, whatever. If they cut me off, I'm still driving. But I'm gonna get there anyways. It's just like this complete different mind perspective, and I think it lets you look at yourself from a third-person perspective psychologically. And then I also got off of all of my pharmaceuticals, sleeping pills, ADD pills, pain pills. I learned how to see and smell the differences between cannabis variety types and can heal myself, and that's what I'm trying to give to the rest of the world through Interpening and Trichome Institute.
And just on that, I don't want to condone driving under the influence, but I have spoke with people on the science side. Actually, a gentleman who builds the tests for a county in Texas, and scientifically, they know that intoxication happens, or they can mark it at around 15 nanograms. So somebody is noticeably intoxicated on marijuana around 15 nanograms. And so doses lower than that, 0.5 is where it's become illegal. And so it's interesting that there's a 10 nanogram spread between where someone's actually feeling effects and where they could actually charge you a DUI.
Have you ever seen my Fox News video?
No.
Okay, so
Which part?
Fox News got me stoned and put me through a driving simulator to show society how dangerous stoned drivers are.
Dun, dun, dun.
And I thought to myself, I was like, my dad's gonna see this, my grandma's gonna see this, all my friends are gonna see this, and this is fucking Fox News. There's no way in hell I'm gonna drive perfectly and Fox is gonna say, guess what, society? We did this test and people can drive fine. Hi. So because I knew that that was the setup, I went in there to set them up. And I wore a spy video camera and I videotaped them and busted them, completely faking the entire thing. So when they're drawing my blood in the back to measure my nanogram level, the cameraman, I bust him explaining to me how the whole thing is completely created so that you're not possible to pass. So go to YouTube, type in Fox News busted stone drivers, and I explain the entire science and how our federal government has over 20 years worth of in-house science that proves that you can't determine intoxication based on THC at blood plasma levels whatsoever.
Jackpot.
Obviously in my classes on campus, I work with mostly, underage students. So, my philosophy is similar to the Andrew Weil mentality that drugs are here to stay, all drugs are dangerous, but we're not advocating drug use, nor are we condemning or demonizing drug use. So it's that educational avenue. But I think one of the most powerful things to come out of this class, and one of the reasons why I love teaching this class more than anything else, is that it's inherently interdisciplinary. You can study this topic from absolutely any angle. So I ask my students to go around, you're a business major, what could you contribute? How might you get involved in this field of study or business or whatever? You're a law student, or you're a chemistry student, or biology, or sociology, or anthropology, or history, or political science, or economics. Honestly, every single topic relates to this subject. And so it's so multidimensional. And, for my students, it just blows apart everything that they took to be just received general wisdom, just the way that the world works. And so uncovering things like this, like what Max took us through in the best way, looking at really how are laws created? Who's writing the rules of the game? I mean, it's back to that question. And once you start peeling away these layers on this one topic, it expands the student's awareness of, wow, maybe I should look at other subjects. What else have we been deceived about? What about all of these catchphrases that we hear all the time about liberty and freedom and capitalism? I'm surprised that word has not been mentioned so far, so I'm going to bring it up. Capitalism. What is capitalism? Okay, pursuit of profit. What is this idea of a free market? There is no such thing as a free market. Markets are created by policies. And policies are determined by who? By people who have influence, who have the money to pay for access and protect their own interests. What is U.S. foreign policy? U.S. foreign policy is not democratic. U.S. foreign policy is designed to protect private corporate investments. And so when you start peeling back these layers, who's the Mexican government representing when it's signing Plan Mexico, the Merida Initiative? It's not designed to protect the people, the indigenous people, the people with the least voice. Basically, what we're seeing with the war on drugs, both at home and abroad, is that the people who are most negatively impacted by these policies, who are literally suffering, if they're not being murdered perhaps, or suffering under long jail sentences, et cetera, just discrimination, all the whole range there. The people who are suffering the most have the least voice in designing these policies. And so it throws into question this democratic system and what we mean by democracy. And anyway, it's just a really fruitful area of study.
Oh, thank you. Said the C word.
Yeah.
It's a big basket to open. Just on, I just wanted to ask, on the academic realm, is there anything, people that are researching or wanting to write or actually wanting to kind of grab a foothold in that piece? Because, that's a legislator kind of comes from the information on that. Anybody that's looking to research or write in that field, in the academic field of any of them, are there any kind of quick tips that you might have on writing about something that so far has been labeled as taboo or not worth talking about or not scientific?
Well, I'll make one little comment and pass to Max. Basically, I mean, to respond in a broad level, one of the things that we talked about with my students too is that because this field is emerging, it's opening, it's absolutely exploding in all these different disciplinary dimensions. If you're involved in this topic in your coursework and maybe your student activism, like Clay, who was speaking, there's a lot of opportunities for career paths. And so law students, for example, who were studying the Marijuana Legalization Amendment 64 initiative while they were in law school, they had no stress at all around job market. Whereas their cohort was like, oh my God, we have to compete for this limited number of spaces that exist, in the law business. And so, but they knew that they had any number of jobs waiting for them in this industry, both on the government side or nonprofit side, et cetera. So it's an exciting realm for research, but I'll let Max talk about maybe more specific.
So I write textbooks on cannabis, and if you want to do work and research about cannabis, you have to go outside the United States. And the reason why is because there's only one legal grow to research cannabis, and it is gardened by the DEA. Not technically, it's gardened by college students at Mississippi State, but it's the DEA's grow. So they grow specific plants that you're allowed to do research on. So right now, Sue Cicely is researching PTSD for cannabis for PTSD, right? She's not allowed to study terpenes. Well, what's the difference between freaking out on weed or not? Terpenes, not cannabinoids. I mean, they're limiting what you're allowed to know. You're not allowed to do research. And so if the federal government says cannabis has no medical benefit, it's like, okay, well, what does every other country say? Oh, we're the only ones who don't think this. Study Dr. Raphael Meshulam's work. I'm so excited I get to meet him tomorrow. From Israel. Dr. Ethan Russo, GW Pharmaceuticals, the UK, or Dr. Franjo Grottenherman, the World Authority on Cannabinoid Pharmacokinetic Pharmacology at Germany. We've been lied to. So if you're going to research and work in Ganj, you need to know what other people have done elsewhere, and keep fighting.
Nice. All right, so we're going to go ahead and wrap the panel up here. So I want to leave with this last question for each of you on the activism piece. From your perspective, what does that mean, and how do we move forward with activism in this realm? Now that it's legal in Colorado, what does that mean? What do we keep doing? Where's the fight at? And if you want to go ahead and start, Max, and we'll pass it down.
Okay. There are lots of groups and organizations that they're dedicated to this. And so if you can't be at the rallies and if you can't be at the marches in other states, there's still ways to support. You can still call their legislators and tell them what you think. There's a lot you can do besides just donating money. But I think the best thing to do is to spread the truth, spread the information, keep coming to events like this, but share these events and these videos and these things with other intelligent people. But one of the students said it earlier, the people who are supposed to be sitting in this room aren't. And so I'm not afraid to get into their face. I'm not afraid to approach them on their territory. I'm not afraid to get arrested or gone to jail. It's happened to me more than a half a dozen times. I'm ready for this fight. And so it's not easy, it's not scary. Don't be afraid and just fucking do it.
Awesome, thanks.
Yeah, I identify as an activist as well, but in a completely different way, and that is simply showing what the possibilities and potentials are for this medicine in non-medical, non-research, non-political ways, and non-academic ways. And that doesn't mean it's not based on a foundation of skill and knowledge and things. It's just taking it out of the box of the theoretical and putting it into the practical. So as an entrepreneur, what would it look like for new programs to come online that are actually facilitating experiences with these sacred medicines? And so, I'm not the only one doing this. We're the only one doing it in this way, but there's yoga groups and there's other organizations that are actually building businesses to do this work, communities. Like, I don't even identify as a business necessarily, but as an expedition voyage, right? So we're letting these guys fight the fight, and that's creating an opportunity for us to actually travel into these new potentialities and explore what's possible. And then we take these nuggets and we bring it back and say, look what we found, look what you can do, but actually try to manifest it, not just write about it, not just do something in the academic world. I think we have the potential now to step into the layperson's world. And so not only am I facilitating these events, this is the reason I'm facilitating events. It's not just to give people a trip or anything. It's to actually shift consciousness. And I also recognize that it's too big for me, right? So we're developing a training program to teach people how to facilitate these events themselves for their friends and for other groups and things. And our idea is, as cannabis becomes legal in other parts of the country. I'm getting calls from Canada. People are flying in from Canada to experience this because Canada could become legal recreationally within a couple of years. And so we're creating skill sets to navigate these spaces, training people how to do these skill sets, and then the ideas. It's like not being in charge of it can be completely out of our control, but letting other people do this work in other places and other localities. And from that space, it's like these little seeds are growing exponentially. So that's where I'm going, and I really recognize I couldn't do this work without Max's work. But again, there was plenty of people doing this work, and really competent people on that. And so I was looking for ways that fit my calling, right? And like what you were saying about legal or business or environmental leadership and things, right? What is your specific calling? And don't mimic what Max is doing, what I'm doing, what Carol would suggest. Find out what your calling is. And the cool thing about this work is that you can actually create an experience with the intention of finding your calling and explore that question and receive information from a transpersonal source. And whether that's a spirit or a higher aspect of self, it really doesn't matter. And what we're proving is that we can all do it. Because I know who I am, I know how glitchy I am, and how funny I can be and things. And if we're able to accomplish this with the imperfection of humanity, what else can we accomplish, right? So that's what I'd like to say to you all: is find your own vision.
Thank you.
So for me, it's probably obvious. Education, being a teacher is my activism. And, I struggled for a long time. My goal was not to go into academia. I was going to live in Washington, D.C. I wanted to facilitate dialogue between policymakers in the U.S. and community and indigenous leaders in Latin America about the impacts of U.S. foreign policy, specifically the war on drugs, because I worked in Bolivia. I've been there for 20 years working on coca leaf and cocaine, and it's just expanded to be more holistic and looking at all these different issues. But again, like I said, teaching students how to think critically, look behind the scenes. Don't just take something for granted. Well, I guess drugs are illegal, so that must make sense. I guess. If these people are morally repugnant, then doesn't that mean they're criminals too? We just don't even think about the origins of how we got to where we are today. And so, I guess I really count on that scaling out effect. So even though I teach these small seminars, once my students learn to think differently, then they're telling all their friends. They're telling their parents. One of our students, their parents were here earlier to watch the event. They're like, oh, our daughter's been telling us about this class, and so they came to check it out. And so it also then is expanded to the Cannabis Symposium. So this is the third annual event, but the first year we're having it on 420 in the UMC. This is a huge deal. This is a non-consumption event. I can't stress that enough. We do not want to return to the smokeout because remember, the smokeout took place when cannabis was illegal. And even though, I was in grad school at that time, I had federal grants, I was not going to jeopardize myself at that point. But every year I would just think this is such a wasted opportunity. Nobody's talking about everything we've been talking about today, the history behind it and the political context and the impacts of the drug war, on and on. It was sort of like, let's get stoned on campus. And there were people like Max who were doing real work on those days, but the majority were not. And so we had that one extreme, which to me seemed like very unfocused kind of rebellion. Not that it didn't have its place. But then the reaction of the CU administration and the student government was to then shut that down and have this reactionary sort of lockdown mentality, and we've got to prevent this and turn our public university into a police state for a day. And so that other extreme wasn't productive either. And so this education is this path forward. And the Cannabis Symposium, it begins at 10 a.m. We have Melissa Zach is the chief of CUPD. Her career 20 years before that was with the LAPD. So she has a lot of experience to speak from. And the chancellor, I work with him every year on this. He can't be there this year, but he's going to give a little video address. The purpose being, this is not an act of protest. This is education. It's inclusive. We are collaborating with the administration and collaborating with a variety of student groups and graduate students and professors and local business people and lawmakers. Vicente Sederberg, for example, the people from there will be speakers. And so trying to talk about these multiple dimensions of the cannabis plant. We have 8 panels with 4 presenters on each panel and a moderator. We have an invited faculty lecture talking about cannabis in the teenage brain. Brigitte Mars will be there talking about cannabis, the plant, and all different panels. And then wrapping up with the activist keynote by Art Way from the Drug Policy Alliance in Denver. And then Wanda James, who's the only African-American woman dispensary owner in Colorado. And Simply Pure is her dispensary, and her husband, Scott Duran, cooking school from Denver, and she was the 2010 Marijuana Advocate of the Year. She's the director of the Cannabis Global Institute. So she's going to be there to really bring it all for full circle and help people think, okay, so here we've talked about cannabis in Colorado all day. How does this relate to the war on drugs on a national and international scale, and what are some of these issues that we're wrestling with? So I hope that you all can be there, free and open to the public. And then, as we said, Daniel McQueen will run a breathwork workshop at the end, which I really like, because to show, especially to students, that you don't have to use a substance to achieve an altered state of consciousness, that you can use your own breath. It's pretty radical.
Awesome.
So thanks.
Terribly radical.
Yeah.
And the breath work is as powerful as the other psychedelic experiences. It's just a different type, and so we're really excited to host that. And the more the merrier. We have a huge space, and we're going to have plenty of sitters to help facilitate safety, and incredible speaker system. So I really encourage you all to come. I think it's at 8 o'clock that night after the keynotes and things. 8 or 8:30 or something. So.
Let me say one other little thing. Part of my goal for this Cannabis Symposium is eventually to have to revive the national teach-in. This was something that was created in the 60s to develop a forum for public discourse around issues of common concern in a way that our elected officials were not adequately doing. In that case, it was the Vietnam War, to bring faculty and students and the public together. That's exactly what we're doing with the symposium. It's our first year on 420, but starting next year, and I'm putting this out there in case you guys have connections, but I would like this to become a national teach-in. If we could have a cannabis symposium in a lot of college campuses all on the same day discussing issues related to those local context, again, this democratic laboratory for reform, that means that begins with dialogue and public education. So that's kind of the goal, and I think we can get there.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I guess the motto is there's more to direct action than smoking pot. The smoke-in goes so far, but now that it's legal, we really have to start to educate and teach and share. It's also, it's interesting because this is an emerging thing in Colorado. It's an equal opportunity for women to start to own businesses, and that's huge. They're getting, instead of trying to enter a market that has been male-dominated forever, they are starting along with men. And so the advocacy levels, it's just really encouraging for all sorts of different things. So I want to thank our guests here today. Is there anything else we need to do before we wrap up, Molly? All right, we're ready for you.